Welcome to Listen to Me, a multi-voiced exploration of the city with 21 guests sharing their personal experiences of Milan's contemporary art, architecture, design, music, fashion and literature. We explore each theme in 4 episodes. Let's begin the second episode of our literature tour. Today, the beauty of Milan, that was much sung by Stendhal, is often hidden, but it is always ready to reveal itself to those who know how to look, as Vincenzo Trione, curator and art critic for the Corriere della Sera, explains about the museum homes of Milan.
Le case museo di Milano
The house museums of Milan give us a clue to understanding the true soul of the city. I remember with great and almost adolescent surprise, well, a bit more than adolescent, to be honest, a work by Stefano Boieri on the courtyards of Milan, in which he described how the city unveiled its true soul, mainly through these spaces that unexpectedly revealed themselves. In short, Boieri, an authentic Milanese, born and bred in Milan, says, when you walk the streets of Milan, the city often doesn't seem to give you anything at all. Then, all of a sudden, these spaces open out before you, and you find yourself in another world. In my opinion, the house museums tell the story of the soul of Milan. It's not by chance that Milan is the city with the highest number of house museums in Italy. These homes reveal the reserved aspect of people in Lombardy. They're like treasure troves, where you enter and an absolutely extraordinary reality is shown.
Una realtà assolutamente straordinaria.
One of these hidden treasures can be found just a few minutes' walk from the Duomo on a side street off Via Monte Napoleone, one of the most famous fashion quarters in the world. It is the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum, a Renaissance dream born from the passion and vision of 2 brothers, Fausto and Giuseppe Bagatti Valsecchi. The intention was to transform the mansion into a time machine, and it's still a place that fascinates visitors and writers even today. Paintings, ceramics, scientific instruments, ivory objects, Murano glass, and 13th, 14th century furnishings artfully meld with the neo-Renaissance spaces designed by the 2 brothers to create an extremely refined and evocative ambience. One of the writers who became intrigued by the Bagatti Valsecchi is the Turkish novelist and Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk. Pamuk, who visited the museum for the first time in 2008, was profoundly impressed. In fact, in the museum's visitor book, he wrote,
I love this house. The idea and imagination they hide behind these walls. They have greatly influenced the novel that I'm writing, The Museum of Innocence.
In fact, in his novel, Pamuk describes the relationship that the main character, Kemal, has with the Milanese museum.
Kemal Bey would take any opportunity to go to Milan to experience, as he put it, the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum, which he esteemed one of the 5 most important museums in my life. By the time of his death, he had visited 5,723 museums.
Let's listen to how Vincenzo Trione describes this love affair between Turkish Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk and the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum.
Lui era venuto a Milano ed era entusiasta.
When he came to Milan, he was really enthusiastic, because at the end of The Museum of Innocence, probably one of his most important novels, Orhan Pamuk entrusts the narration of his memories to Kemal, telling the story of his romance with Füsun, the woman he is in love with. Interestingly, just before he dies, Kemal goes to Milan and visits the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum. In the ideal outcome of this journey, Pamuk enthusiastically accepts the challenge to install a number of display cases at the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum. This was a challenge for him in the sense that he wasn't taking them somewhere anonymous. He was taking them to a place he had loved and visited so much, because it is a place that lies a little bit outside of time. In fact, the most extraordinary aspect of the Bagatti Valsecchi is that it is truly outside of the mainstream. It is a place that could quite easily be from the medieval, or the 1800s. It's almost like a glitch in the timeline, a sort of anomaly, because you enter that space and find yourself outside time itself. This fascinated Pamuk a lot. So to link up his passion, which I also share, with what he was writing about on the future of museums in his manifesto on small museums, he substantially says that the future of museums is in our homes, not the Louvre or the Hermitage, not the Prado di Uffizi or Brera. No, in people's own homes. In some ways, the Bagatti Valsecchi expresses this idea of a sort of private monument that becomes part of the national heritage, a heritage in which even the mundane, the lowliest of objects, becomes loaded with a completely different sentimental value. Pamuk makes an observation on this that has always struck me deeply: the difference between objects and things. The objects we use are produced, whereas things, like those found at the Bagatti Valsecchi, are products imbued with symbolic value. The Bagatti Valsecchi Museum, and some of the other Milanese museum homes, are places where things become, Pamuk would have said. One expression I used that he really liked was, they become bastions of sentiment.
Diventano delle valli di affetti.
On one hand, what stands out the most when visiting the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum is its powerful ties to the past. A story told through its Renaissance furniture, the period architecture and stained glass windows, while on the other, we have the two brothers' openness to modernity, which can be seen in the late 19th century technologies they had installed in the mansion, like showers and electric lighting. But it's so much more than this. In fact, far from hiding in the past, the two brothers dive enthusiastically into their present at the end of 1800, taking to the skies in a hot air balloon and risking their necks on a velocipede, the perilous predecessor of the bicycle. Even the choice of Renaissance decor was not a retreat into the past. In fact, after the unification of Italy, many intellectuals viewed the era as an ideal model for giving symbolic roots to the still fragile concept of a unified Italian nation. In short, the Bagatti Valsecchi House Museum is the perfect metaphor for Milan, with its call towards the past and forward-looking momentum. This is how author Alberto Rollo views this relationship between the museum and the city of Milan.
I have what you could call a rather stylistic memory of Bagatti Valsecchi, now known as the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum. Here also, in their avid desire to stand out, we see architectural expressions and forms that come from a heartfelt sense of ennoblement. A factor that is also thanks to the skill of the architect. This is another aspect that you do not see at Necchi Campiglio House, for example. Whereas here, at Bagatti Valsecchi, you can feel this element. We are made to feel ennobled by those times, which are also inherently related to the history of Milan. There is no disconnection. The house captures, recapitulates, and synthesizes it, throwing it back out again like a vision. It's the same thing they do in England, in London, for example. There's a huge call to the past. The Bagatti Valsecchi brothers are playing that game, a game you see replicated in their homes outside Milan, above Menaggio, high in the air on the hill amidst gardens, ravines, and medieval perspectives. There's that very same spirit here in Milan.
Ecco, c'è quello stesso spirito lì.
The Bagatti Valsecchi Museum is just a few minutes' walk from the stop Monte Napoleone on the yellow metro line M3, or the stop San Babila on the red line M1.
Not too far from the Bagatti Valsecchi is another fascinating museum, the home of 19th century author Alessandro Manzoni, Italy's most important writer. In fact, with The Betrothed, Manzoni lays the foundations of the modern novel in Italy, contributing to the creation of a new, straightforward and brilliant language. architecture and design scholar Antti Pansera tells us more about Casa dei Manzoni, Manzoni House.
Alessandro Manzoni
bought this house in the heart of Milan, which not only still preserves a number of rooms from his times, but also the rooms where Manzoni and his family spent their days, namely the study and the bedroom. One of the most interesting things is that Manzoni renovated his home in a neo-Renaissance style. We are roughly in the mid-1800s, and as a homage to the post-unification climate of those years, Manzoni made a very specific stylistic choice, which is what the Bagatti Valsecchi brothers also did later on. For the Italian unification, the Renaissance was the most significant moment to remember, to be put back into circulation, so to speak, as a way to unite Italy after the unification.
L'Italia dopo l'unità.
But why is Manzoni still so loved and respected by Italian writers today? So much so that the great Sicilian writer Leonardo Sciascia used to reread The Betrothed before starting on a new novel. Let's ask writer Alberto Saibene his view on the matter.
Tra I libri che non ho citato,
One of the first books to read on Milan that I haven't mentioned is obviously The Betrothed. It's a book about Milan, but also Italy. You could say The Betrothed is one of those oracle books where you open it, read a phrase, and you can immediately relate it to your own life in any single moment, not only in these days of the pandemic, but actually in any moment of our lives. I still haven't seen the recent renovations on Manzoni House, but I'm sure you can find a lot of documents in there. But I believe, and the idea first came to me when I was in Dublin, which is a city of great writers like Joyce, Yeats, etc. There's a writer's house in Dublin, and I believe that Manzoni House deserves to become the home of Milanese writers in the same
la
way.
casa degli scrittori milanesi.
In fact, Manzoni profoundly inspired the writers who came after him. Here's what the author Alberto Rollo has to say.
Ho un rapporto con...
I have a special relationship with Manzoni, The Betrothed, but I also really love the sacred hymns. It's very deep, very layered. It's not just a book I read at school. Reading and rereading The Betrothed, even only in sections, is a regular practice. Sadly, it's our one and only novel. This is the real problem with The Betrothed, up to a certain point anyway. But I really like the relationship between the Milan in The Betrothed and, more generally, Alessandro's relationship with Carlo Emilio Gadda's Milan. This is an electric touch, a moment of great passion, in which I can really feel the energy of Milan in the air.
Sento circolare l'energia milanese.
Writer Stefano Bartezzaghi is also captivated by Manzoni.
Un'esperienza.
One of the most extraordinary experiences I had during lockdown, which I spent in Rome, I had been listening to many things for quite some time while out walking, including literature, and it was in Rome that I listened to The Betrothed audiobook, narrated by Paolo Poli. It was wonderfully enriching, and hearing it read out so admirably was quite an experience, a highly immersive one. For some time now, Manzoni, particularly The Betrothed, has become an important book in my library, and one that I frequently return to.
Della mia biblioteca.
Manzoni House is just a few minutes' walk from the stop Duomo on the red metro line M1 or on the yellow line M3.
This is the end of this episode, but don't remove your headphones just yet. In the next episode, we'll be taking you to another splendid museum house, the Gian Giacomo Poldi Pezzoli Museum. To listen to the next episodes, follow us on your favorite podcast platforms or visit www.casamuseo.it, where you can also buy the Casa Museo card to visit the Poldi Pezzoli Museum, the Bagatti Valsecchi Museum, and Villa Necchi Campiglio at a discount price. The Boschi di Stefano House Museum is free to visit.